Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Trauma Informed Classroom workshop. I work in Bakersfield City School District as an educationally related mental health therapist. And I am currently an adjunct professor with Vanguard University through the Global Center for Women and Justice. So I'm so honored to be here and be a part of this conference, to be able to share information and resources with the Navajo Nation and the community. So really, really excited. And again, just so honored that we have this opportunity to be here today. And please join us tomorrow. We've got tons and tons of additional resources and training opportunities. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so my goal is, we've got a short amount of time, but my goal is that we obtain some general understanding about trauma, how it affects kids, their brain, trauma, how it feeds into human trafficking, and learning some possible techniques that you can actually start implementing in the classroom, or at least take advantage of the resources that I'm providing to help build those resources in the classroom setting, along with identifying practical ways to build resilience in the classroom. So those are just some of the goals. Again, we've got a short amount of time to get that done, and so hopefully we'll get through all of that. So what is trauma? Number one, traumatic events can be dangerous. They can be frightening, maybe a cause of bodily injury of some kind. It might even look like a threat of death. A lot of people experience trauma when maybe they've been through a car accident, like a major car accident, or some kind of abuse, domestic violence, you name it, right? Some of the potential reactions that we see as a result of that trauma can include fear, terror, helplessness, and physical symptoms like heart racing, vomiting, loss of bladder or bowel control, and so many others. But these are just some of the things that we see that come along with some pretty severe trauma experiences. And so I've listed out some traumatic events here of things that, again, people may categorize as traumatic events, and some people may or may not, but these are some of the typical things that we see in the mental health field. So I want to point out one thing in particular, which is generational trauma, because the Navajo Nation and other tribal communities have been so affected by this in particular, due to so many factors. I can't even go into all of those, but I want to highlight this because I think it's important for us to be aware of it and to know that there is hope. There are resources. You can continue to guide and build resilience even through that experience. So I want to share a few things here. So generational trauma may begin with a traumatic event affecting an individual, or traumatic events affecting multiple family members, collective trauma to a larger group or community, cultural, racial, ethnic, or other group populations. Those at the greatest risk are in families and groups that have experienced significant forms of abuse, neglect, torture, oppression, and racial disparities. Families can make resilience in their new legacy by actively seeking to address the trauma that they've experienced. So building resilience through open and loving communication between generations is one of the best ways to loosen that generational trauma and its grip on the family and the community. Healing happens when family members speak up and work through any hurt, pain, or abuse from the past. And those are some of the recommendations, specifically coming from the Amen Clinic, who deals with so much trauma in California and across the world. They've got clinics all over the place dealing with extreme trauma. And so I just want to really highlight that there is hope. This doesn't mean that, it's a death sentence for this community or this family or somebody who's experienced some kind of trauma. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. So I want to share a quick video go.
Our experiences during our early years actually affect how we think, feel, and behave. Adverse and traumatic childhood experiences can derail development, which is why it is important for schools to be trauma-informed. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are sadly pretty common in our society. ACEs take various different forms, including abuse, neglect, domestic violence, and difficulties stemming from mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse in the family. ACEs are more prevalent in children from disadvantaged and under-resourced communities, and discrimination can add to the stress and hardship for some. Not all forms of adversity are traumatic, but many do cause harm. In the most severe and long-lasting cases of adversity, a child's psychosocial functioning can be inhibited. Among other things, this can impact their ability to form and maintain relationships throughout their lives. Schools can provide the perfect setting to promote resilience and lessen the effects of adversity, but for some children, experiences in school pose a whole other set of emotional challenges. Traumatized children can have difficulty regulating emotions, staying on task, and relating with others, which can prompt bullying from peers and harsh discipline from teachers. This treatment can add even more stress for children and can lead them to question their safety and develop mistrust in authority figures. This can be particularly impactful if those authority figures lack awareness in how trauma affects cognition and behavior, or if they are being limited by their own implicit biases, emotional challenges, or exhaustion. Efforts are underway to change how schools serve vulnerable and traumatized children. To do this, it's important to identify which programs are responsive to diverse student populations and which are most effective and sustainable. Our research shows that school-based trauma-responsive programs use a number of whole-child and systems-oriented approaches. These approaches provide safe, nurturing, and supportive learning environments and therapeutic interventions when they are needed. They may also work to increase knowledge of trauma in school professionals, parents, and community providers. To become trauma-informed, schools must ensure that all students feel safe, respected, valued, and meaningfully engaged. Teachers and other school professionals must be able to identify symptoms of trauma and know their own biases and triggers to minimize the risk of traumatization. Social-emotional skills must be incorporated into classrooms to promote resilience and effective communication, and school professionals must establish and reinforce clear expectations for behavior. These core components can also be applied to other settings, such as child welfare and juvenile justice, to develop a broad and bold transformation of our child-serving systems.
All right, so I feel like that did a really good job of kind of summarizing a lot of what we want to cover today. And let's go back to our presentation. Go. So ACEs, you heard that statement. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and we definitely want to make sure that all of our school staff are aware of this particular issue because it affects so many of us. You can see here in the slide that we see abuse, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, like physical or emotional neglect, along with household dysfunctions like mental illness, incarceration, mother being treated violently in a domestic violence type situation, substance abuse, or even an absent parent or divorce situation. These are all potential ways of inducing some kind of adverse experience on a child. And the more we have of those, the more likely we are to, maybe make negative choices in the future, get involved in drugs or alcohol abuse, you name it. So I think it's really important for us to be aware of at least some of the elements here and how easy it is for so many of us to experience these. Okay, so for all those teachers out there, I want you to look at this slide in particular and think about some of the kids that you work with. What do you see? What are the commonalities? Do you see kids who maybe show some irritability? Maybe they are numbing or feeling hopeless. Maybe you notice that they have a real intense startle response, or feeling, some kind of self-hatred, maybe even some self-harming behaviors or suicidal thoughts, panic attacks, overwhelming emotion, eating disorders. These are all potential things that you might see in the classroom as a direct result of trauma. And so again, the list is, huge, but I want you to be thinking about these things. And instead of thinking about, oh, that troubled kid, or, oh gosh, that kid, I'm going to get him next year, or I'm going to get her, I know what kind of behaviors they're coming with. Think about what's causing some of those behaviors, what's happening at home, what maybe they have experienced that are resulting in some of these behaviors that you're seeing. And on this slide in particular, I want you to think about what are some of these elements. These are the top 5 risk factors or vulnerabilities that we see in both labor and sex trafficking. So what are the things that you're seeing commonalities here? Think about that for just a second. Okay, I'll point out a few of them since, we don't have a lot of people in the room to talk about them. Unstable housing, substance use, relocation, or migration. Those are the top 3 things that I see in those commonalities there. So if we think about that, unstable housing, substance use, maybe even the mental health concerns, right? These are some major elements of concern, but how many of our families are experiencing these same things? That is putting them at greater risk for potential trafficking. So again, thinking about them, making sure that we're aware of what the risk factors are that are creating major vulnerabilities in our community. Okay, and this is the continuum of sexual abuse. I'm going to go into this more tomorrow in my presentation, but I just want you to think about this briefly. If a child starts experiencing some form of sexual abuse in their childhood, typically the person who's doing that, the person who is taking advantage of that child, is somebody that they love and or trust. And so if they're linking that with sex and or abuse, their boundaries get blurred, things start going haywire, things are not going the way that they maybe should be for that child. So again, I want you to join me tomorrow in our panel discussion tomorrow afternoon, and we'll discuss this a little bit more in the discussion around sexual abuse. But the reason that that's important is because approximately 90% of CSEC, commercial sexually exploited children, have a history of abuse or neglect. And between 70 and 90% of CSEC victims have some form of child sexual abuse in their past. That is why this is so important, because we know that just the fact that that child has experienced some form of child sexual abuse makes them 28 times more likely to become a victim of exploitation in the future. This is a major vulnerability, major red flag that we definitely want to highlight, and we want teachers, community members to be aware of so that we can really bolster the resources around those individuals who have experienced some form of sexual abuse or maybe at high risk of sexual abuse. The other element that I want to point out here is that Black and Brown communities are at higher risk. We see in certain studies, in particular, one in South Dakota that was done around survivors of sex trafficking, that 40% of the survivors were Native people that only represent 8% of the total population. Major disparity, right? And so again, we want to make sure that we're identifying that the Navajo Nation, the community, is at greater risk as a result of being a Black or Brown community. Some of the important information that I know you're probably familiar with, but I want to also highlight here is that online enticement is happening at more rapid rates than ever before. Due to COVID-19 and kids being home with potentially unlimited access to the internet, traffickers took full advantage of this opportunity to recruit kids online. And so we see that NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they identified that there was a almost 98% increase in online enticements. This is a major, major concern, right? Our kids have access to the internet, and we want to make sure that they are not being exploited or enticed to get into an exploitive situation. So I'm not going to go through the details of this, but this is a resource that I have uploaded in this particular workshop in SHED, or how do you say it? Sketch, I don't know. Anyways, it's one of the great resources that's in there for you, but this is put out by the U.S. Department of Education. And if your schools are using a multi-tiered system of support like we do in California, or a PBIS system, this is a great resource for addressing child sex trafficking in particular in your school setting. So there's hope. We must build resilience. This is what I'm getting at here. So what do we do? What do we need to do in schools to build that resilience? Catherine Chin said that the best defenses against human trafficking are healthy families and strong communities. And I think I just heard the First Lady say something very similar to that. It starts in the home, it starts in the community. We've got to start really changing how we're raising our kids, right? And building that resilience into them, building empathy into them at an early age. Here are two more resources that are in your list under the workshop. We've got a Hanover handout of best practices for trauma-informed instruction in school. And I've also included all the different 40 developmental assets for kindergarten all the way through 18 years of age. So first we need to be trauma informed. That's number one, right? So Hanover provides some really great resources. I want you to look at that in depth when you have time. But teachers can identify students coping with trauma by looking for the behavioral and emotional and academic symptoms that indicate a student may be experiencing trauma. Teachers can also support students coping with trauma by establishing meaningful, positive teachers student relationships, which help students feel safe and supported to learn. Developing positive connections with students experiencing trauma requires teachers to model and teach strong social emotional skills. And this can be really hard for those of us who maybe didn't necessarily grow up with some of those skills being taught in our home or in our community. So teachers should develop strategies and skills to notice and de-escalate a student's behavioral or emotional overreaction. Some sample strategies include calming, redirection of that student's behavior, offering support and choice, and avoiding escalation responses like raising our voice, right, when they're getting upset or escalated, or getting physically closer to that individual when they're already escalated, right? We want to make sure that we're not increasing the escalation, but trying to decrease that escalation. Again, just please check out the Hanover document and the 40 developmental assets. Again, we just don't have the time to go through all of them in this workshop. So this is a really great, simple resource that I want to include, and please go check out echotraining.org if you're interested in downloading this or any of their other infographics to be able to hand out to your teachers or school staff in your community, because it is a great, simple way of remembering the do's and don'ts of trauma-informed, compassionate classrooms. So create a safe place. Establish predictability in that environment. Build a sense of trust between the teachers or the staff and the children, so they know that they can go to you if they need support or help or resources. Offer choices when possible. I know sometimes in school it's not possible, but maybe they have a choice of doing this math versus this math, right? Or maybe they have a choice of taking a break now or in 5 minutes. Maybe they have a choice of doing a de-escalation breathing technique in their chair or going to a calming corner in the room. Stay regulated yourself. This is so, so important in working with trauma-informed anything, right? We have to stay regulated. We have to learn our own coping strategies to be able to help and deal with these situations. So don't punish kids for their trauma symptoms. That's the only don't here, really. Don't punish them for the experiences that they've already had that are resulting in these trauma symptoms. We do want to foster safety. And these are some of the key elements of how we can do that. Maybe playing classical music in your classroom, deep breathing, stretching, yoga, model and practice those things with your kids so they can see that you value that too. Specific directions instead of calm down, right? Telling them, okay, I need you to take a deep breath with me right now. Right? I need you to sit in your chair quietly so we can relax. Whatever that might look like for that particular situation. We want to watch out for too many sensory inputs. Too much of that can be an overload, especially if somebody's experienced trauma in their past. Maybe taking a walk outside or taking a break. These are really great grounding techniques that we can all use in our day-to-day life. So how do we build resilience? We want to label those emotions, demonstrate coping skills, embrace mistakes when they happen, be optimistic, model, again, model, right? I can't say that enough. And get outside, take a break, do those grounding things, right? You guys have an amazing community here with wonderful resources. I think it sounds like it would be a wonderful opportunity. So all of these things are teaching kids that we care about them when we model that respect for them. So prevention is so, so important here as well. This is a resource called NetSmartsKids.org. It's a free resource. It's provided by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And it is so great. There's games, there's internet safety techniques, there's all kinds of resources for kids of all age groups. So I would just want to encourage you all to go through there. Check it out, use this with your own children, in your schools, as a social emotional learning opportunity, as a safety net for your kids, right? Building that fence before they fall off into the canyon. Another app that I want to highlight is Canopy. It's a parent control app that can be used on all of your smartphones and devices that kids have access to. Building safe relationships, building empathy for human life. These are some of the most important things that we want to teach our kids, and we want to develop those connections and resources. Don't let your kids fall into this trap, right? OnlyFans, right? This has been made popular over COVID, really. But, it was made popular kind of by Bella Thorne, who's like a famous actress or something like that. I don't know. But the average content creator makes less than $200 a month. But they want to present it as something that is, fast money, easy way to access whatever you want in life by maybe selling some nude photos or other things. Thinking selling nudes or being a sugar baby or something like that is not normal, and it's not okay. We want to teach our kids that there is value, right, in who we are and what that looks like. And we don't want to be leaving them open to potential exploitation by these online predators. So how can you report human trafficking? I never end a presentation without talking about this. Call the national hotline for human trafficking if you suspect that somebody is involved in a trafficking situation, or if you yourself or a friend need help or support. 888-3737, 888. Or you can always text Be Free. That's 233733. These are 24 hours, 7 days a week. Anywhere in the United States, you can access resources, get connected, or report suspicious activity. So please, please put this information in your phone if you don't already have it. I just want to say thank you. These are some of my resources. And check out, if you haven't already, the Ending Human Trafficking podcast. It's a great resource where you can glean so much information about human trafficking and all the ins and outs of it. And that will conclude my session. So thank you so much for everybody that has joined us today. I really appreciate you, and please stay on, keep going for the rest of the conference this week. Thank you so much.